In today's video, we will be covering improving your FinOps practice by closing the gaps from your maturity assessment. In our first video, we reviewed the results from the survey done by the FinOps organization in March 2023. We found that 2/3 of the teams were still in the novice, or what we call the basic crawl phase. 25% were in the intermediate walk, and less than 8% were in the advanced run phase. Then in the second video, we took a look at what goes into a good assessment. How do you do it? Who do you interview? And we walked through an example assessment. Today's video is going to be taking the result of that assessment and focusing on the gaps to identify where the low-hanging fruits are in that gap analysis. Which areas to focus on to have the most impact on improving your practice. I'm a firm believer in using ROI justifications for any actions taken. The FinOps practice should be like any other business effort and should pay for itself. You should be able to identify the payoff period. Because FinOps is iterative like all cloud processes, I recommend using the 80-20 rule, also known as the Pareto principle, which states 80% of outcomes or outputs result from 20% of all causes or inputs for any given event. In business, the goal of the 80-20 rule is to identify inputs that are potentially the most productive and make them the priority. FinOps is an iterative process, as mentioned, and that's one of the important reasons why we want to use the 80-20 rule, because we want to attack those areas that we're going to get the most benefit out of, knowing full well we're going to come back around and revisit these issues again, and we'll continuously improve upon them. Every day lost of running efficiency is lost money. So start with the most impactful changes and make the process pay for itself. Improvement starts with strengthening the inform phase of measuring the many sets of data. We will want to consider which tools we might want to use, what tools we may want to purchase, if our staffing levels are appropriate for where we are today and where we want to get to within a certain time frame. It's important that we get participation from all the teams in the organization. Once we have completed our gap analysis, it's time to get to the optimize phase, acting on those gaps which will be most impactful to close. I thought this was a good visual that CoreStack put together in one of their presentations, which demonstrates the building block nature of FinOps. You must have the data collection, reporting, as well as the allocating resources to departments or products in place in the cost governance base. Everything else builds on that. Consider prioritizing gaps in the lower levels, such as the cost governance base level, as they will pay dividends downstream. In order to inform and get visibility, you're going to need to use tools. And as part of that FinOps March survey, the results were that 97% of the teams use native tools from the cloud providers, such as AWS, Azure, GCP. 2/3 of the people used what I consider Cloud 1.0 tools like Cloudability and Cloud Health. Look to these third-party tools as you start to find your site-specific needs are not being met by the native tools. The next area is observability. So this starts to get into a little bit more of the efficiency of your resources, your application, and finally comes the specialist tools. These are tools that are focused on resources like containers, spot instances. This is also where we are starting to see some of the Cloud 2.0 tools that have AI built into them, such as ProsperOps. Squeeze as much out of the native tools as they are, for the most part, free, and you know the platform vendor will continue to keep them current with new features and functions. This slide shows the breakout of the tools used by the respondents in the survey. As you can see, the native tools are the top 3, and then you can see the names of some of the third-party tools and the breakdown of what percentage of the teams are using them. The third-party tools are primarily SaaS-based service delivery. Their fees are typically based on the size of your cloud build, which gives you an opportunity to start to use them early on in your cloud adoption, grow into them so that when you start to identify gaps in your native tools, you'll have these tools ready to go. They work very well until you get to maybe $30 million a year or more, and then you'll start to notice a delay in the processing times. Uh, and that'll affect your anomaly detection for the most part. Your trending should be fine, but I think with a lot of teams, as they start to get over 30 million per year, that's when they start to build their own tools to do things like the anomaly detection in a more timely manner. You're going to want to automate the care and feeding of these tools and make sure that the distribution of the reports get into those hands of the people who are able to action them, those people closest to the decision making who can decide, yes, I want to stop that resource, that server, that database. I want to pause it on the weekends, or I want to terminate it entirely. This is the domains and capabilities page of the FinOps framework. I include this in there as it's a great cheat sheet for you as a executive to keep in your drawer and refer to as you're preparing for meetings, as you're focusing on certain areas for your optimization. So, as I mentioned before, I, the majority of the teams out there are in the crawl phase and are moving to walking. I like to focus on getting you towards the high end of walking, or what I call walking tall. And these are the areas that you're going to be focusing on. Obviously, cost at the top of the list, tooling, because without tooling and collection of data, you can't move forward. Organizational alignment, participation is key. You already have these other departments, whether they be finance, the business department, your application programming engineers. You want to leverage their time and you want to get them involved so everybody is pulling in the same direction. And then at the high end, performance benchmarking is certainly where you want to get to in unit cost measurement and recognition of those teams that are doing well. And then lastly, you want to grow this practice in what I like to term a just-in-time inventory of staffing, where you're getting the people when you need them. First and foremost is cost. We all agree that that's the cornerstone of FinOps. There are many other intangibles, but I believe it all starts with costs. You want to get the data into the hands of the people who can make the decisions, who can action the items. Your cost optimization is going to be key. You're going to want to provide guardrails and guidelines to your teams, whether it be in the design phase when they start and build it with cost in consideration, as well as to the operations teams to make sure that they're keeping an eye on if there's any excess usage or excess capacity in the resources. Anomaly detection, if anything is outside your expectations, you want to identify it quickly and put a stop to it. Forecasting and budgeting. This is extremely useful, I believe. Ask your teams to forecast what their spend will be in the next month, and then have them review the actual spend with finance. It's a great exercise to let people get familiar with how they forecast, what they're expecting, and it'll help finance, because this way the teams that are the DevOps teams, the ones that are spinning up and down the resources, they can give a heads up as to, hey, we're going to be doing more testing next month, or you know what, I think we can shut some things down next month, things like that. And Cloud rate optimization. So this is a very, very powerful step that you can take once you know what your usage is going to be for the next quarter, the next year, the next few years. And all of that depends on your building blocks. You've collected the data. You're now doing forecasting to the point where you're confident in your forecasting. Then you can enter into multi-year agreements with the cloud vendor. Organizational alignment, as I said before, this is key because you want all of your teams taking advantage of cloud agility. You want all of them thinking in terms of what the trade-offs are between time to market, cost. So everybody is aware of why you're using the cloud and the way you're using it, what the desired business outcome will be. And by bringing in these other teams, you'll get buy-in from them to continuously improve. And cost optimization starts to become fun for everybody because you're all pulling in the same direction. This is from Flexera's 2023 State of the Cloud report. I like to go back to Flexera's reports because they incorporate a set of reports that RightScale, which Flexera bought in 2018, has been doing for the past 12 years. So they have a running trend of services. What you're going to notice here is, yes, cost efficiency is at the top of the list, but right behind it is delivery speed of new products and services. And many of the items on this list are cloud agility intangibles. And that's where this organizational alignment comes into play. By having teams like finance and the business and procurement in the loop of decision making in your FinOps practice, you're going to be able to affect these areas quicker and better. The performance benchmarking capability is where you're going to take the KPI reports that have been created and trend them, set up target goals, set up guidelines for your teams to use to see how they're doing against their forecasts, how they compare to other teams in the organization. The more you raise the visibility of how teams are doing and set benchmarks for them, the better chance that they're going to do the right thing. They are going to try to be as efficient as possible. I like to send out forecast alerts halfway through the current month if a team is trending to be over forecast for that month. It gives them the opportunity to adjust their resources or at the very least notify finance that they're going to be over budget. So we saved staffing for last, as this is going to be the culmination of the other gap analysis that you've done for your other capabilities. Once you've identified those gaps, you're going to want to take a look at your current staff's capabilities, both from the ability to correct them, as well as do they have the time to fill in those gaps. What we're going to see from the analysis is that you're going to want to grow into your FinOps practice. Let it pay for itself with cost optimization early on. Consider using somebody who's already been there and done that, who can come in at a key point, an inflection point, where you're making a decision maybe about tools or about how you might set your benchmarks, things like that, with somebody who's been there and done that. Whatever you're doing, every staff member should be thinking about automating the function that they are doing. This slide is from the FinOps 2023 maturity survey. This will help for you to compare yourself against other members across the globe based on the cloud infrastructure spend. So I broke out a few ideas. I grouped them into three categories, and this can take you from the top end of crawling up to the run phase. When your cloud infrastructure spend is less than $1 million a year, you're probably having your cloud architect perform the FinOps functions. Presuming that a cost optimization has never been done, that person should be able to achieve 10 to 20% cost savings in the environment. Most of the other team members, finance, business, procurement, you're going to start to ask them to participate and expect that it's going to take 5% of their time on average to participate in this effort. As you move into the 1 million to 10 million per year spend, that's when you're going to want to build a dedicated team. And I believe that picking somebody who is a manager, a vice president, who has technical capabilities, because this is going to be a one-man show, a one-woman show, they're going to need to understand the technical merits of what's going on, understand the finance and the business needs, and marry all of them. This person is also going to be the one who's going to bring in that second dedicated person and is going to be building your FinOps practice. Now, during this phase, that person or the two people who are working FinOps, you should expect them to be able to achieve an additional 8 to 15%. Keep in mind, the biggest low-hanging fruit has already been identified and actioned. But now you've got a dedicated team, and presumably they're going to be able to pull out more cost savings opportunities. Your personas, your other team members, your other organizational alignment members, yes, they will increase their average time in this effort, but it'll go from 5% to about 7% of their time. And again, these are very rough averages, but it kind of gives you a sense of once these team members get involved and get knowledgeable with FinOps with a little bit of training, the incremental additional time spent becomes less and less. As you get to between $10 million and $100 million per year in cloud infrastructure spend, you'll most likely have 4 people dedicated to the FinOps function. At this time, you might consider bringing in a junior person with some cloud engineering knowledge and good project management skills. At this point, my crystal ball starts to get a little bit fuzzy as to what you'll need. It's all going to be based on those additional assessments that you're doing, either annually or quarterly. And you should expect that the other teams should be spending no more than 8% of their time in this effort. Presumably, you've automated a lot of the functions for them. They've become knowledgeable in how this is done. And so it might even be significantly less than 8% of the time. So, what's going to be the makeup of the staff as you mature through the 3 phases of FinOps practice? Well, you'll have a combination of full-time employees, external consultants, perhaps professional services from your tools vendors, and then dedicated individual contractors. The highest percentage of external people will be in the crawl phase. The idea being that you're going to be at a fork in the road during this phase, and you'll want somebody who's been there and done that, who can present to you the different options and the benefits and drawbacks of each, and can help you to move forward quickly. As you mature, you'll be able to commit to more full-time employees based on your assessment reviews, the gap analysis that you're doing of your assessment reviews. And presumably, you've now made some major decisions as to which way you're going. Are you going to use external tools? Are you going to build your own tools? You've already identified who the members are in the other teams, and you've brought them in, and you've started to build momentum in your FinOps practice. This slide from the survey shows us what the average costs are based on job title and region. And as you would expect, the vice president and director level people are going to be the most expensive, on average between $200,000 and $300,000. And then comes the managers. Now, the individual contributors, this one's a little tricky because this could be anything from a junior project manager to a high level automation engineer. And so that's going to probably vary pretty widely. When we look across to the regions, as you would expect, ASPAC, North America, EMEA are the most expensive, with on average between $100,000 and $150,000 across all of the job titles. Latin America is the least expensive. As always, we're going to finish up with actionable takeaways. So once you've identified those gaps in your maturity assessment, you're going to want to weight each one of them as far as what the impact is going to be and how difficult will it be for you to achieve that. You're going to want to pick those gaps which are at the base of your pyramid, because once you've filled those, it will enable you to do things downstream. As far as tooling is concerned, squeeze as much as you can out of the native tools, but don't be afraid to start to evaluate some of the third-party tools, particularly when your cloud spend is small, as the tools fees are generally based on your cloud infrastructure size. And so you can do an assessment more cost effectively earlier on in your cloud adoption. Certainly track the gaps that you're seeing in these third-party tools to use to consider when you're building your own tools. You might want to think about bringing in professional services from the tools vendors themselves who can jumpstart your use of the tool. Organizational alignment is going to pay huge benefits to you. It's going to be the glue that brings all of the teams together for agility purposes while you're driving your FinOps maturity. So at the outset, it's going to be new to these other teams, but over time, they are going to get acclimated to cloud agility, to variable spend, and they're going to be able to work as partners with you. Use the performance benchmarking for forecasting, for setting up goals, and for helping your teams to measure how they're progressing and how they stack up to other teams in the organization. When it comes to staffing, certainly your FinOps practice should pay for itself. The process of bringing on additional people should be a combination of full-time employees as well as external people. Those external people, since they're temporary, should be to fill a gap, decide on a tool, set up some of the best practices early on as you're going from crawl to walk, and automating the functions, setting the groundwork for the automation of the ongoing care and feeding of that iterative wheel: inform, optimize, and operate. I hope this has been helpful to you, and have a good day. Hi, this is Mark Sinaka, the FinOps Advocate. Today's video was following up on your assessment. This series of videos is made for the CTO, CIO, and CFO. It's meant to help you to participate in the cloud FinOps practice and to drive agility and cost efficiencies in your organization. If this has been helpful, please subscribe and you'll get notified when new videos come out. Thanks.